Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United.
Welcome to the opposition view on All for United. We are going to be previewing Manchester United's next upcoming game in the Premiership against Newcastle United, and I'm delighted to be joined for this episode by Pete Davey. Pete, a warm welcome to you, my friend.
How you doing, Grant? How are you? Everything okay?
Yeah, everything's good. It's almost Christmas, and I can't wait for the hopefully good fun to ensue. Although it's been very difficult times, of course, with more restrictions, isn't it, in the last wee while? But hopefully it will be a good period nonetheless, I'm sure. But obviously we are here to talk about the game. But before we do, please remember to like and subscribe on All for United. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and a range of other social media platforms. Pete, just want to give you a little bit of a chance to kind of introduce yourself and tell the viewers on All for United a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm part of a Newcastle United podcast called Loaded HQ. And we're just five guys that just love talking about Newcastle United. So we have our own weekly shows that we run together. And also, we like talking to like-minded fans from the opposition as well. So it's really good to come on today to talk to you guys. Obviously, you guys are the next opposition for us, and we are for you. So it'll be good to get down to it and talk about the upcoming fixture and see how it's going to go.
It's going to be a very interesting game, isn't it? I mean, Manchester United haven't played for a number of weeks, obviously, with their own COVID-19 situations. But I think this will be a really interesting battle. And obviously, Newcastle fans very passionate about their club. It's going to be a fascinating game.
It will be. And, certainly speaking from a Newcastle fan point of view, there's no better situation just after Boxing Day at St James's Park under the lights. There's no better situation to welcome in, like you said, Man United, who haven't, and you're right, quite rightly, haven't played for a few weeks and have had their own sort of issues with COVID. So it's really going to make for an interesting game, and I'm sure we'll get down to the details about certain things, but it's going to be an interesting one. There's a lot of sort of moving parts to this game coming on Monday.
Let's talk a little bit about Eddie Howe, because obviously he has taken over the Newcastle job. What have you made of his time in the role at St James's so far?
Well, look, first and foremost, I think the Newcastle fans are delighted that he's manager of our club. Having Steve Bruce as our manager for 2 and a bit years, and he never really was wanted at the club after Rafa Benitez left, and he went through a really difficult time. But he also made some really bad decisions, both on the pitch but also off it, with regards to the fans too. And the fans wanted him gone. As soon as we had new owners, the first thing we wanted was Steve Bruce out, because he was becoming a toxic element to our club. So Steve Bruce left. Eddie Howe came in, and like I say, he's completely sort of transformed the outlook of our current team. Now, it won't necessarily project that onto the pitch, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second, but he has really created a feel-good factor around the players, and that's been noted by a lot of players in the squad. There's a better feel with his backroom staff, that they've created a good vibe there. And also, although results won't tell you this, the way in which we set up and the way in which we play is different now under Eddie Howe. And I think the only thing that's missing now is a transfer window in order for him to really bring in the players that he wants in order to play the style of football that he wants to see his team play.
I mean, he didn't have the ideal preparation, didn't he? Because I think he was supposed to be in the dugout for the Brentford game, wasn't he? But I think he tested positive for COVID-19, didn't he? And had to self-isolate. And that was an absolutely tremendous game, that game 3-3. But then his first game in charge was that match against Arsenal. And I watched that game. And for large periods of it, I thought Newcastle were relatively competitive. But Arsenal, in the end, showed their class.
Yeah, I was there. I was there for both. For the Brentford game, I travelled up, and I was, as I was travelling up, the news broke that he wasn't going to be there because of the COVID situation, and that was really like sort of heartbreaking for fans, because I think being at home, your first game against Brentford, a winnable game, I think we'd have won that. I think the element of him not being there really affected the players, the fans, the occasion. And then I was at the Arsenal game at the Emirates as well, and yeah, we contained Arsenal for long periods. We had to make Dubravka had to make a couple of big saves, but Ramsdale at the other end had to make a couple of big saves too. But it's the old regime that kicked in the second half in terms of the concentration and the switching off. There were certain players that, unfortunately, are just not good enough for the club and need to move on. And that's why I kind of reiterated before that there is a real need for a transfer window in order for Eddie Howe to bring in the players that he wants to play in his position. Because I think, beyond being honest, I think if he gets that transfer window and gets what he wants, which I think he will, I think you'll see a different Newcastle United team for sure.
One thing that Eddie Howe did need was a first one in charge, and he got one at the start of this month at home to Burnley. I mean, one of the teams in that battle at the bottom of the table. That's such a huge boost. I know that the last few games haven't gone particularly well, but just to get that win on the board will have been very important.
It was a massive win. I mean, we things kind of went a bit against Eddie Howe. You kind of thought, where was he going to get his first win from? The situation with Brentford, we weren't expecting anything from Arsenal, as we've already said. But then we had the Norwich game where we were dominating them for that early period until we got the City red card. And then, to be fair, we had the better of the play even after that. Our Norwich were not a good side, and we were so unlucky to not win that game. But the Burnley game was massive, and it was massive because we knew what was coming with the fixtures that we've had over the festive period. And it was more of a relief than anything. It was our first win of the season, Eddie Howe's first win at the club. And to be fair, I think we probably should have won by 3 or 4 goals against Burnley. I think we were by far the better team and easily deserved the win. But I think those jitters towards the end where you're not quite sure. Players, the manager, have not had that winning feeling, and you get those little jitters. That's kind of how it felt towards the end, but we managed to see it through, and it was a big 3 points with, as I've said, what's been a really tough festive period.
I was going to say the festive period has been very tough, but the fixtures really haven't been too kind for Newcastle, especially recently. I mean, Leicester away, Liverpool away, and Man City at home. 11 goals conceded and only 1 scored. Does that tell only part of the story, do you think?
Yes, it tells part of the story. What you won't see in those games, in that for long periods we were in the game. The Leicester game, the first 20-25 minutes, we were by far the better team. The pressure that we put them under, the chances we created, we had one cleared off the line, we had a couple that went just wide, weren't really good chances, and Leicester were on the ropes. Johnny Evans got injured, but then again, it's the lack of quality going into the later periods of the game started to tell. And particularly away from home, we struggled with that. It was the same with Liverpool. We took the lead. We took the lead quite rightly. We played some good football. You could argue that the decisions have gone against us. And on our podcast, we had ex-referee Keith Hackett on last night that talked about some of our decisions that that have gone against us, and he was in full agreement that they were really poor refereeing decisions. We go back to the Maddison penalty that shouldn't have been a penalty. You go back to the equaliser from Jota against Liverpool, where Isaac Hayden was on the floor for a good 10 seconds holding his head, and Mike Dean doesn't stop the game. Any other referee in the league stops the game. It plays on. They end up scoring. And then, they obviously take the lead, but then, at 2-1, we have a penalty shout where Ryan Fraser gets taken out by Trent Alexander, and I think anywhere else on the pitch it gets given. It didn't. And then you go back to the game on Sunday against Manchester City. We started well. We were the better team again early on. Man City did not really create that many chances in that first 45 minutes, but yet go 2-0 up. Some of our mistakes again, but we have a chance just before half time with a stonewall penalty that's not given on Ryan Fraser. We scored. Callum Wilson scores that 2-1, it's a completely different game. We get our backs up, Man City get their backs up, and our tails are right up. So it doesn't tell the full picture, the full story, because at times in those games we've been in it and we've been active and we've been attack-minded and we've looked to create chances. And that's why I say that, the Eddie Howe blueprint is really starting to come through. But decisions have gone against us, and lack of concentration and a lack of quality is what's kind of gone against us. But I think the major decisions, more than anything, have definitely gone against us at key moments. I think if the Jota goal doesn't go in at that point in the game, I think it's a different game, because we were really withholding the pressure. If the Maddison the Maddison penalty doesn't get given at that point, that was on 41 minutes. We go in at half-time 0-0, because they didn't look like they were going to create anything other than that penalty. That penalty opened up the game for Leicester. We go in at half-time against Leicester, we're still in the game. It's a completely different game. So these small moments have really impacted on our season for sure.
And when you're down at the wrong end of the table, you need that little bit of luck, don't you? I mean, I watched that Manchester City game, and I actually agree. I thought Newcastle started the game very well, but I think it was Kieran Clark, wasn't it, who just misjudged Cancelo's kind of cross-come ball back across the box, and Ruben Dias had a fairly easy task of tapping home. And then I thought Newcastle rallied a little bit. I think Joe Linton had a really good chance, and then obviously Cancelo scores a really, really good goal. And then you talk about the Ryan Fraser penalty. I mean, well, obviously this is a Manchester United channel, but I was watching it and I couldn't believe that the situation wasn't even looked at by VAR. I mean, it was absolutely crazy, that moment in the game. But I just want to talk to you about certain players that you think are beginning to thrive under Eddie Howe. Who's standing out for you in these early times coming into the club that Howe is coming?
There are two players, possibly three, that really sort of stood out, and their performances have significantly improved since Eddie Howe's come in. And one of them is Joe Linton. Now, Joe Linton has got a lot of stick from Newcastle fans and been laughed at by opposition fans because of the price tag in which he came in. 40 million is a lot of money for an unknown player at 21 years old. And, a lot of people don't know this, but Joe Linton was kind of the horse that broke the camel's back with Rafa Benitez, because that deal was done and signed the January before the end of the season of Rafa Benitez's last season. And Rafa Benitez didn't want him at the club. He didn't want him to be signed. He was signed as a striker, and Rafa Benitez says he's not worth that money. Anyway, it happened. He came in, and he was very clear quite early on that he wasn't a striker. He didn't play as a striker at Hoffenheim, and he's come in under Eddie Howe, and Eddie Howe has basically looked at his raw attributes and said, look, you're not a striker. And Joe Linton knows this anyway, and says, right, this is how you're going to play. You're going to play sometimes as attacking midfielder and sometimes as a midfield three. And his attributes are he's big, he's strong, he can travel with the ball, he's good in a tackle, and he's done that job. And he has been probably our best performer in every game that Eddie Howe has kind of managed the team. He's been really, really good. You won't see him scoring goals and assists. You won't see him popping up at the back post or anything like that. But what he gives to the team is that passion, that work rate, that ethic in the middle of the park to really ruffle some feathers. And he did it against Jordan Henderson, against Liverpool. He did it again against Man City, where, as you quite rightly said, after our goals, we kind of rallied. And Joe Linton was the linchpin of that. He was driving forward with the ball. He was trying to make attacks happen and really taking the emphasis on. And we haven't seen that from Joe Linton before Eddie Howe came in. So, but Joe Linton has also really kind of, really kind of stood up to the situation and really kind of took ownership. And we're hearing reports that he's spending a lot of time with the data analysis guys under Eddie Howe, and after training sessions and matches, looking at where he can improve his game. So he's really taken on responsibility there. So he's probably the main one for me. The second one, Joe Shelby. Joe Shelby was thought of as a guy that we just wanted out the club on 80 grand a week at Newcastle, one of the highest earners. We were saying, look, he's not doing his part. And we thought under Eddie Howe that expects a lot of work rate from his players. A lot of fans were saying he's not going to fit well to Eddie Howe's mould in the way in which he wants his team to play. He's completely surprised all of the fans, and his performances have been fantastic. His work rate, his ability on the ball, and I think that's to having an understanding of a style of play and how his manager wants him to play on the pitch. And I think there's been a little bit of focused attention on that. And he's playing his best football. He was rested against Man City, I think, with this game in mind against Man United. So I fully expect him to be back and playing. But he's played every game other than that and played very, very well. The third one I would say is Ryan Fraser. And we've talked about him quite a lot because he's been in the headlines, certainly with the penalty incidences. But his ability to press high up the pitch, his ability to link up with Callum Wilson that we know from Bournemouth, and it's very, very clear that he did not get on with Steve Bruce. He didn't like Steve Bruce. They fell out quite early on into him signing at the club. And we weren't sure at the time, weren't sure if it was his attitude or not, but it's very, very clear now. And even when he talks on the website about Eddie Howe and this new way of managing a team under Eddie Howe, he says himself it's significantly better. And he's, without naming Steve Bruce, he's certainly pointing the fingers at Steve Bruce as the reasons why things weren't as good before. And I have to agree with him because I'm being honest. I think if Eddie Howe had started the season with us back in August, with the games that we had at the beginning of the season, the West Hams, the Villas, the Southamptons, the Watfords, he would have got points in those games. There's no doubt about it. And Steve Bruce is one of the biggest problems of why we're in this mess.
One player I wanted to touch on to as well is Callum Wilson. Of course, he's teaming up again with Eddie Howe. Obviously, we're both at Bournemouth together, and obviously Fraser was as well. Do you think he'll really kick on another level since Howe's come in as well?
Sorry, can you just repeat that last bit again?
Sorry, I was just saying, do you think Callum Wilson will really kind of flourish even more with Howe in the Newcastle job?
Definitely. With Callum Wilson before under Steve Bruce, it was very much he was a poacher. He was just kind of arrive in the box, nick a goal when you can. You wouldn't see him get many touches on the ball. You wouldn't see him really part of the build-up. But that's what he's doing now. He's part of the high press. He's part of the build-up in the play, the holding up the ball, the linking to the midfield. And that's what he did at Bournemouth. So he is more actively involved in the game, and he's become a real leader. He was, when Lascelles was suspended for the Norwich game, Callum Wilson was made captain, which was a surprise because it's normally Joe Shelby, but he is seen as a real leader in the team. And I do think when better players come in and we are playing a little bit more front foot football, I do believe that Callum Wilson will become even more influential than he is now because he's our top goal scorer with 6 goals. And as well as that, I think he'll score more goals. He scored 12 last season. He had a number of injuries, but I could see him with regular football and without injuries and a few additions to this team. I can see him going beyond that this season for sure.
Well, he scored 6 league goals so far this season, so he's already halfway there, which is a very impressive total so far. Last point on Newcastle before we move on to talk about some of the United things. What is the biggest issue with Newcastle? Because defensively, that's seemingly a big problem. 41 goals conceded in the first 18 games. That is a real area that I'm sure Eddie Howe is trying to address, but maybe it's not quite had the desired effect just yet.
No, I think you're absolutely right. The biggest problem with our team is the defence. The defence is the biggest problem for Newcastle United right now. And unfortunately, it's because we've got players that are just not good enough. It sounds really harsh saying that, but they just are not good enough. What happened under the previous ownership is that Mike Ashley would buy one set of players. So he would buy attackers to make the attackers really good and just discard the midfield and defence. And then they would get old and tired and stay beyond their welcome. And then he would improve the defence and not the attack, and then the reverse would happen. There wouldn't be any balance to the signings. And so what we've found now is that the new ownership have just been left with the defence that are old, that are kind of, some of them have stayed well beyond their welcome, and they are just not good enough for this level. It's as simple as that. So Kieran Clark, case in point, some of the mistakes Kieran Clark's making is because he is not Premier League level anymore. He proved it under Rafa Benitez for a couple of seasons that he could play in the Premier League, But even then, he found himself out of the team quite a lot, and he was a bit part player. He's been asked to play on a regular basis for Newcastle because we have nobody else. Federico Fernandez is a half decent defender, but he's 34 years old, and he will need to be transitioned out. He's not a player that should be playing every week. Jamal Lascelles is, and I keep saying this on my own podcast, is that he is not a footballer. It's well documented that he comes from a basketball family and he doesn't follow football. He did a podcast during lockdown where he talks about the fact that he doesn't watch football outside of playing the game. In order to be a good defender, to be a good quality player, you have to monitor and watch football. You have to learn from other players, some of the best in the game, to be able to develop your own game. You ask and speak to the likes of Harry Maguire and Rafael Varane. Rafael Varane would have been watching Sergio Ramos every day in training at Real Madrid. Harry Maguire will be watching Rafael Varane and the way he plays because he's an elite centre-back. They will watch these players and look at where they can improve their game and become better, which is why they find themselves at Man United. Jamal Lascelles doesn't do that. And you can tell on the pitch that he lacks concentration, he lacks ability to be able to play out on the ball, and he's kind of started to regress the last 2 or 3 years. So we really need a massive upgrade. And to be honest, with the links that we've had in the transfer window, with the type of players that we're going to come in, that are not going to come in, but have been linked heavily with us, if we were to get 2 or 3 of those players, it would significantly improve our defence, and I think we would then be able to play the Eddie Howe style of football because we'd have the defensive players there in order to keep things intact.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see what that January window comes out and what unfolds for Newcastle, that is for sure, and we'll keep a watching brief on that. Let's talk about the upcoming game, because we're 22 minutes into the show. We've not talked about Manchester United yet. We're going to talk about the game now. What have you made of Ralf Rangnick as an outsider looking in his first few matches taking over? I mean, obviously it's been interrupted with COVID-19 issues, but they did have 2 Premier League victories against Crystal Palace and Norwich, both winning 1-0. And of course, they did draw, that game in the Champions League, the last game of the group stage against Young Boys.
I like Ralf Rangnick. We were heavily linked with him coming in as director of football initially after the takeover, so we knew a fair bit about him. He's a talented manager. You can tell he likes a high press. He likes to push players forward. He likes to attack, and you've seen that from Manchester United, and they have looked more compact. They've looked more as a unit since he's come in. They look more organised, and there have been better performances. I think some of the issues with Manchester United, I'm sure you'll agree, have been in defensive areas. So for me, I've got 2 friends that have been Man United season ticket holders for 15 years, and they go up every week to every game, home and away, and in Europe. So I talk about Manchester United with them quite a lot. And one of the little tweaks that he made quite early on, which I think worked really well, was bringing in Diego Dalot instead of Wan-Bissaka, because defensively he was really opening you guys up and leaving huge holes there. The fact that he's brought Alex Telles in, and Luke Shaw's been out. I think he's had a head injury, but for him being out of the team, because they were probably 2 of your worst performers, in my opinion, watching Manchester United. But they've just solidified, those fullbacks have solidified your defensive unit and made you a lot tougher to break down. And yeah, it's allowed you to be more effective in attacking areas. And look, if you guys can show up at the back, you've got a man up front sitting in his number 7 t-shirt that can always punish a team, and that's exactly what he's done. So it's been a better start for you guys, but as I say, there are opportunities that are still there. There are still little leaks in the defence that I think that we could exploit potentially. Going back to the Norwich game, you gifted them a lot of chances in that game, even though you did win 1-0. And I think against a better team, and I was just watching that game and thinking, if Callum Wilson had those chances rather than Pookie, or rather than one of their other players, that we could exploit that situation and maybe nick a goal. And I'm hoping, from Vi's point of view, that that's the case come Monday.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to actually ask you about where you think Newcastle can target Manchester United, because I agree. I think that game against Norwich, you kind of saw a little bit of the old Man United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. David De Gea had to make a few very important saves. They were kind of relying on that little bit of brilliance a little bit. Obviously, there was the incident with the penalty, which Ronaldo scored. It was one of these games where United didn't really play that well, but they got the 3 points. And I feel, personally, that is something that Ranić has done quite well with United, is in games where we haven't played great, we picked up points, whereas under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But give us a little bit of an idea as to where you think Newcastle can hurt United in this game on the 27th.
It's exactly that. It's in defensive areas. So, I mean, it will all depend, because I think there's, and I might be wrong here, but I'm aware that Rafa Varane is back in training, so could well be in contention. Now that would make it significantly more difficult, because I think if it was Lindelof and Harry Maguire, for me that would be the target. Is straight down the middle, because they for as good a defenders they are, as a unit, they're not as strong, and you can get chances from them in and throughout the middle. It would be in those type of areas, and it would be because of our high press, in that Manchester United like a lot of the ball at the back, and they like to build from the back, which is great. But what tends to happen is that teams that like to press high can win the ball high up, and that's what we'd look to do to exploit Man United. So I think in those defensive areas, with the likes of Maguire, with the likes of whether Wan-Bissaka comes in, or Diego Dalot, it'll be looking to exploit those areas, because both players do like to play on the board and can gift possession. That would be our ways in. As well as that, we've never really been the best set piece team, but we've improved under Eddie Howe, and he's working. Jason Tyndall, our assistant manager, has been doing a lot of work with us on attacking set pieces, and I think set pieces would be another area where we could exploit you as well. Because we are working on one or two different things, and it's noticeable in our game that we're trying one or two different things, and so yeah, that would be it. And then for me, it'll be the fans, roaring us on. We really have a 12th man at the moment, regardless win, lose or draw. The fans at St James's Park are really backing the team, and there's no better, like I say, no better situation than under the lights on a Monday night, roaring our fans on to hopefully a second win. So definitely in those defensive areas, I think if we can keep that tight. But equally, I think, with your high press is where you could expose us. Guys, if you guys press high, Ronaldo's always got the question mark of whether he's going to press or not. If he doesn't press, he'll allow us to play out, which is exactly what we're going to need. But if he presses high and he presses strong, I think you could cause some problems with us, with the likes of Sancho and Rashford, with your pace in and behind.
Yeah, I think Sancho has really flourished so far under Ranić, and I think he's only going to really improve on that. And obviously, Ronaldo has been excellent this season, and between him and David De Gea, in my opinion, have been United's most consistent players this season. Of course, the last time the two teams met was Ronaldo's return, wasn't it? Obviously, it was the game at Old Trafford. It finished 4-1. Ronaldo scored 2 goals in that game. Bruno Fernandes scored as well. Jesse Lingard got the 4th goal. Manquillo got the Newcastle goal in that game. How different a game is this game on the 27th compared to that game earlier in the season in September? Because it's 2 different managers for a start.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I think, I'll be honest, I think the game might go the same way. So, I was at the game at Old Trafford in the away end, and you guys had a lot of the ball. You dominated possession, but we broke quick. We broke fast. We had counter-attacks the other way, and we did create problems. It was arguable that we possibly could have had a penalty in the first half. We created 1 or 2 other openings, and that's how we exploited you in the second half to get the equaliser. Is that it was through a counter-attack, a fantastic one from Almiron. And then St. Maximin squares it to Manquillo, who's not a known goal scorer for us, but it was a great finish. And I think it will go the same way. I think Eddie Howe will say, right, you guys like the possession. We'll give you the possession, but we're going to press you. We're going to make it difficult for you to get through the lines. And when we win the ball back, we're going to go for you. And that's where we'll target the centre-back areas, the likes of Harry Maguire with our pace that we've got in forward areas, and the likes of Diego Dalla and Telles, who like to really get forward as wing-backs. They like to kind of leave the centre-backs behind and push really far on, but we can exploit those areas with our players, with St. Maximin, with Callum Wilson, with Ryan Fraser potentially, Miguel Almiron, who are lightning quick, that can get into those areas very, very quickly. And I think that's what he'll look to do. So I think the game will actually probably go the same way, but I think it'll be the case of which manager's tactics will work on the day. And like I say, we're at St. James's Park, and I would like to think that, the points that we need to stay in this league this season, a lot of them will come from St. James's Park. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of take the game to you guys and exploit the fact that you've not played for so long, and hoping in one sense that as the game goes on, if we're in the game or we're leading, that your tiredness within your squad for not having to be able to train at the complex and train together and have that kind of united front over the last couple of weeks, we can possibly exploit that.
I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic, isn't it? How will this rest period affect United? Will it be a good thing, or will it not be a good thing? I mean, okay, Newcastle have played 3 games since United have played last, but Newcastle lost all 3 games, so there's a fitness issue, and there's also a confidence issue as well, which I think is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And you mentioned the tactical aspect there, Pete, and I think that's also going to be very interesting as well. Bit of a quiz question for you here. Who was the last scorer in a winner for Newcastle against United?
Who was the scorer for Newcastle? Who was the scorer for the winner?
The last time Newcastle beat United.
If I'm right in thinking, it was Matty Longstaff.
Yes, indeed.
It was his first ever Premier League goal, or his first goal for the club in the first team. I remember watching that game, and it was a strange one because it was after a 4-0 batter, sorry, a 5-0 battering at Leicester the week before that I was at. And we really needed a reaction, and we kind of dug in and made it difficult for you guys, and again nicked it on the break, exactly how I was kind of describing how we need to play on Monday. But yeah, very, very good finish through the legs of Maguire into the bottom left-hand corner. Very, very special moment for Matty Longstaff for sure.
I'm glad you got that right, because as well as a Manchester United fan, I'm also an Aberdeen fan, and of course Longstaff is on the books at Aberdeen, so I'm always very interested to hear that dynamic. It's not quite happening for the Dons, but that's another story. Yeah. But what I was going to say,
obviously he's leaving.
Yes.
His loans finishing. He's coming back in January.
Well, I wondered if he might be, which could be very interesting as well. But the reason I mentioned that game in its sense is that was the last time also Newcastle beat Manchester United, but it's only 2 wins since 2018 over Man United for Newcastle. That's not a particularly great record. I know there's been a lot of situations on and off the pitch, but nevertheless, it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't.
They were both 1-0, incidentally, those 2 wins.
Sorry?
They were both 1-0, those 2 wins.
Yeah, so, I think there was one under Rafa Benitez with the Matt Ritchie goal that won the game. Again, we needed that goal to kind of keep us in the league, help keep us in the league, and then it was the reaction goal from Matty Longstaff. But, we always give Man United a good game. Up at St. James's. I think there was a 3-3 as well down the line where Paul Dummett got a late equaliser in off the top corner in the stanchion. It was, we always tend to give Man United a good game. I mean, the quality always tends to come through, but we always give you guys a good game. I think there was the 4-1 game at Old Trafford, not Old Trafford, at St. James's Park, where Bruno Fernandes scores a fantastic goal. But actually, I think the equaliser comes quite late in the game, the winning goal comes quite late in the game. And actually, for long parts, we were in the game. And that's the thing. Like sometimes the score lines don't always reflect the type of game it is. And I think we will look to give you guys a game. I'm not saying we're looking to win or we're expecting to win. Far from it. Which is always going to be a tough run of fixtures. But I think Eddie Howe will be putting this team together in order to make sure that we really come out and attack you guys and ask some questions for sure. So I'm expecting that on Monday at the very least.
How important is the first goal on the 27th, because I think it could be massive for both teams.
It normally is for Newcastle. We are not really we're not very much a team that comes back in games. That's not just with Eddie Howe or with Steve Bruce. It was the same with Rafa Benitez, and beyond that, we always have been a team that struggles to get back into games once we go behind. So the first goal is crucial for us. If we have something to hold on to, it instantly raises our game by 10%. It makes us run harder, track harder, press harder, because we've got something to build on. So I think if we do get the first goal, I think that will be important. I think it's also important when that first goal comes about. So we've had a knack over the last year or so of getting the first goal, but quite really early on in games, and teams have eventually sort of broken us down. But if we sort of get the first goal maybe in that 30, 40 minutes, the first 30, 40 minutes, and then hold off till half time, and then see how the game runs, or if it's sort of in the 50th, 60th minute of the second half and we go 1-0 up, I think that then goes in our favour, because we will dig in and make it very, very difficult for the opposition to try and get anything back into the game. I think if we score early on, I think it could be a struggle for us for the rest of the game, because our mentality changes and the game plan changes slightly. But equally, I think if you guys score first, I think it gives us the opportunity to try and fight back into the game. So it will put a little bit of pressure on you guys. So yeah, it is definitely a crucial one.
Of course, the game is live on Sky Sports, and I certainly will be tuning into that. And I think it's going to be a very entertaining game. We're coming very close to the end of the episode. So, Pete, it's time for a score prediction. What's your thoughts? Do you think Newcastle can get something out of this game?
I do. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. Far from it, because Manchester United have got some supremely talented players at your disposal. Ronaldo, Sancho, Fernandes, just to name three. We've got very, very talented players, and talent always does tend to come to the top in any game, regardless of fitness or situation. So, but I do think, as I keep referring to, under the lights at St James's Park just after Christmas, I think it's an opportunity for us to try and get something. And I think Eddie Howe will potentially take a point on Monday. So I think it'll either be sort of a 1-1, 2-2 game. I think there'll be goals. I think there'll be entertainment value in that game. But I think it'll be a draw. So I'll go 1-1.
You're going 1-1. Now, I have to go for United win, not just because it's an all for United channel, but also because I genuinely think United will win the game. And I think they'll maybe win it 2-1. I think it'll be a very competitive game. I think it'll be hopefully a very exciting game, because I always like Newcastle Man United in the past. There's always been lots of good matches between the two sides over the years. But I think it's a game I think United will have to play well to win, because, as you say, Newcastle getting that so-called proverbial managerial bounce, so to speak, it's going to be very tricky. I think it's going to be a totally different game to the game at Old Trafford earlier in the season. I know United won it 4-1, but I do think it'll be a gritty game. And yes, we saw City, we saw Liverpool win against Newcastle recently, but that doesn't mean to say that they had it easy, as we've talked about on the show. There was periods in those games, and the Leicester game as well, where I thought Newcastle were competitive. I expect them to be the same here. I think United will nick it 2-1 at this end. Well, that very much comes to the end of the opposition view here on All for United, as we preview that match between Newcastle United and Manchester United. Thank you, Pete, for coming on the show. Where can people find you on the socials?
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, sorry, mate. I was just going to give you a bit of a build-up. Where can people find you on the socials?
Oh, apologies, my internet went off for a second there. Yeah, of course. So you've got my Twitter handle at Dave2010. You can catch us on our YouTube channel, which is Loaded HQ, coming up with lots and lots of Newcastle United content. There'll be match day lives, there'll be reactions. We are launching tomorrow our brand new transfer show. So the Fully Loaded Transfer Show will start tomorrow at 8 o'clock, which will be joined by Newcastle United journalist from Newcastle World, Jordan Cronin. And we are going to talk all transfers, because I guarantee you over the January period, Newcastle are going to be the talk of the transfer window, because simply we have to buy players in order to stay in this league. It's as simple as that. So it's going to be a massive show over the coming weeks, and it kicks off. It debuts tomorrow night.
Well, that's a great, nice plug there, and I want to wish you guys all the best for that channel. You guys produce some great content, and obviously great to chat to so many fans across football, but also as many Newcastle fans. I'm sure watching this will be intrigued as well to hear your thoughts on the game itself against Manchester United. Remember, this is All for United. Please like and subscribe. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and a range of social platforms. Remember, you can check out all United content right here on All for United. But that is us. We are off. Thanks very much for tuning in. Let us know your thoughts. Pete, thanks very much for coming on, and all the very best to everybody. Have a safe Christmas and take very good care.